Hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode of SUGTalks. I'm Craig Dale, your host, and together with our special guests we'll take a deep dive into the topics, challenges and opportunities facing SAP users today. Please make sure you subscribe so you never miss another episode. I'm delighted to be joined today by Philip Adams, Head of Group IT at Mercury, and also board member and Ireland Special Interest Group Chair for UKISUG. Philip is also part of the SUGTalks core leadership team, which is the SAP User Group Executive Network. So welcome, Philip. And today's episode is the latest in our series of interviews with senior IT leaders to hear about their careers' highs and lows, tips for getting ahead, and the challenges that they face throughout their career. So I look forward to discussing that with you today, Philip. And just before we get started, thought I'd ask a quick question, just to get us moving forward. Well, it is winter at the moment, but, if you could be great at any Olympic sport, which would it be and why? I'll give you a couple of minutes to think about that. And, I was thinking about this myself when I got this question. I thought, okay, Well, back at school, I used to represent the school at the high jump and also the javelin. But I do quite fancy a bit of pole vaulting, I think, quite fancy using a big stick to jump over tall objects. Now, I know that's simplifying that, so I'm sorry for any pole vaulters out there if I've kind of really simplified what you do. But yeah, I think I'd like a bit of pole vault. Philip?
Thank you, Craig, and it's great to be joining you on this podcast this morning. Good question around the Olympic sports, and in fact, I think nowadays, given that Olympic sports seem to come and go, new ones emerge every year, and older ones seem to disappear, almost the choice is limitless. Being somewhat vertically challenged myself, I think I couldn't do the long jump or the high jump. But I've always fancied the water-based ones, and probably if I had to select one, it would be rowing, either as a team or possibly solo as well.
Oh, superb. But I also remember you were excellent at the Bear Grylls obstacle course when we had our volunteer day once. So maybe a bit of parkour, push that into the Olympics for you there, Philip.
Yes.
Okay, thanks very much for that. And okay, just back onto our topic, which really is you. And, just to get us started, let's go back to the beginning. And could you just let us know, how did you get into IT and what led you to the field of SAP?
Yeah, I didn't start in my, in fact, when I studied at university, I did mechanical and manufacturing engineering, so IT certainly wasn't on the career trajectory at that time. Having said that, the more people I've met in the IT field, they've tended to come from an engineering background or of some description anyway. So after spending 1 year working with the organisation that I worked with through my university career, I decided to move from that into management consulting and spent a number of years working for Accenture. And that really was my first exposure into, I suppose, the IT world, albeit from a business analyst perspective, whereby you worked with companies to understand their business processes and bring technology to improve those processes, support those processes. And after working in a number of projects in both public and private sector, I decided I want to really more or less settle down, move from a consulting background more into industry, whereby you get the opportunity to see and realize the benefits of bringing technology to an organization. And in that shift, I still maintain very much a business role, but very much on the basis of supporting it through IT solutions and technology. So that's not necessarily a traditional route, but probably more a route that would have been probably used by a lot of people back a number of years ago rather than more recent times.
Thank you. Yeah, and yes, I kind of agree there. When we have these conversations, many of our guests have come from either a business role or a different side of the world, and then transitioned into IT. And you've been with Mercury now for over 20 years, I believe. And how did you end up with Mercury, and how have you developed there over time?
Yeah, so as I said, when I was with Accenture, I was looking for a different challenge at that point in time. My previous role in Accenture was very much working with companies, developing the solutions, and then once it's live and established, you move on to the next one. And as I said, you never get to see the tangible benefits for that, and was the business case realised. So when the opportunity came up in Mercury, it was very much doing that, but it was obviously an industry role, so it was within the organisation, and not just working with them to understand their business process and to find a solution, but then also when it was implemented, then you had to support that, run that, and make sure that then that was fully adopted within the organisation, and they start to realise the benefits. So that's really the opportunity that was presented, and we went through the traditional, went for an interview, explored a bit more about what the company had to offer, and at that time the company was going through quite a significant growth phase. It was in the early noughties, Mercury worked within the construction industry. So the construction industry in Ireland was booming, in Europe it was booming, and the company identified the need to really build on that through the use of technology solutions. So in the early days in Mercury, it was very much actually before we selected SAP, it was meeting with the business to understand their business processes, do an element of business process redesign. So you're actually really defining what way you want these solutions to work from a technology footprint first, and then trying to find a solution which best matches that. And we had made the decision very early on that it wouldn't be a stick build. It wouldn't be a case of DevOps where you developed a solution from scratch. It was very much look at an off-the-shelf ERP solution and find the most appropriate one that fits the business and the business trajectory and aspirations and strategy that we had. Given that we were expanding at that time into different regions, we needed something that operated across a global scale, as well as had the capability and features that the company needed a technology solution to support. And we initially looked at about 50 plus, I would say, business applications. Quickly narrowed that down to a top 5 or 6, and then down to 3, and we ultimately picked SAP for the company. And then my role then shifted from project redesign and business analysis into project management to deploy the SAP solution, which takes a bit of time. You don't do that overnight. And naturally from there, then it was a case of, as I said, realise the benefits of the solution. So once it was deployed initially in our Irish operations, then extended to our global template, and make sure then we get benefits from it. And you quickly realised after time it was like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. As soon as you got to one end, you had to start somewhere else with a fresh coat. And that's really how it has transpired over the number of years.
Oh, excellent. And did you have much SAP experience before that rollout?
None whatsoever.
Wow.
And to be honest, most of the products we had looked at, there was no experience of those solutions. So the competitive products to SAP, and there were no in-house experience. So in one respect, there was no bias. There was no preconceptions of what we expected from it, in the sense that we defined our requirements. It was a matter of matching the business requirements to the solution capability, and it was a quick learning curve. But at the end of the day, it was quite a number of years ago, and not having that preconception of what you expected to get probably allowed us to be flexible in terms of using the solution to meet our requirements, or finding where we needed to bespoke and reconfigure elements to meet our business needs. And yes, it was a baptism of fire, so to speak, but it would have been with whatever product we selected. Mm-hmm. And I suppose in hindsight now, 20 years on, I think we still made the right decision to select SAP as a solution at that time.
Okay, I'm sure SAP will be pleased to hear you say that. just So just going back there, obviously, no experience of SAP yourself, and obviously you also need a good team around you to support and to work with you on that project that you're leading. So how has your team evolved over time?
Well, I suppose when I joined, my role sat within Group IT, but IT then was a very small function, and it was primarily providing the classical desktop support to IT services, and it was very limited. So SAP, when we deployed it, was the single biggest business application, and I always called it a business application rather than an IT one for the company. And so my role was still very much more aligned to the business than it would have been to IT. And there was a core people managing the whole infrastructure and all the technical aspects that traditionally would still sit within an IT umbrella. And yet I needed to understand that as well as the core business thing. And that's something I've never, even as my role within Mercury has transitioned over time. Once SAP was deployed, I was then seen as more the business applications manager. So we started to implement not just further modules with SAP, but other applications that would either integrate or not within SAP. But those all still sat within the group IT responsibility to deploy and get live and support and maintain once they were adopted. And then slowly I transitioned more into a more senior role within Group IT, and then became the head of that department just a little over 10 years ago. So I suppose my skill set needed to broaden as my career progressed, and this is all on the back of the company also growing in terms of size, turnover, and the countries that we're operating in. When I first joined 20 years ago, we were in 3 countries. We're now in 16 across Europe, and naturally the company has grown as a result, and I've had to grow the team. But I've also, through not just the evolution of IT within Mercury, but just in the world in general, more and more of our business are using IT solutions to support their jobs. So the number of applications has expanded, the volume of people using those applications has expanded, and therefore I've had to have the skill set in the team to grow with that. And I'm in somewhat of a lucky position now that everyone who works within Group IT with a team of 33 people, I've had some shape or form in the recruitment and defining the role that person needs to fulfill, which is not always an opportunity that everyone gets when they take on the role of a head of function. Usually they inherit an element of skill sets and capabilities that need to be changed to meet the new strategy. But I've been lucky to be able to define and mark that strategy over time and make sure of the right resources and skill set within the team to deliver on that strategy.
Oh, thank you for that. And just reflecting on some of the things you said there, it's about focusing on, I suppose, one key element that I picked up there on the, you mentioned that you see SAP as a business application, not an IT application. And then obviously what you then were talking about was, as the team and the organisation has grown, that they're utilising IT applications to support their jobs. So again, it's a business-driven rather than IT-driven, whether it be a solution, a project, or whatever. The focus is on the business.
Yeah, absolutely, and I've even seen that shift over time. Even 10 years ago, you would have needed to not necessarily drag, but really encourage and drive the business to have that conversation with you around how can they work with us to find solutions to meet their needs. Now it's a shift whereby they're beating the door down. They're the ones bringing the ideas and the solutions to Group IT, asking for their help and assistance to deliver that. So it's a nice shift of the partnership's always been there, but the initiative nearly has moved from an IT one to a business one, which I think is better in the long run. It means then developing that business case, getting the support to see the success of those solutions when they're deployed becomes much easier and probably more tangible. It's horses for courses, and there's pros and cons with both strategies, but certainly at this point in time it is successful. And when we first deployed applications in Mercury, they were very much back office. Our industry still relies very much on, trade labour on a construction site, installing equipment or building a building. But we're seeing more and more of those the elements of that workforce using technology, which they wouldn't have done in the past. And that in itself is quite challenging, but also exciting as we see it grow and develop within the company.
Yeah. So just staying on that point, obviously Mercury, specialist in complex engineering construction projects, do you have specific challenges that you have to overcome in your sector, especially let's say when using SAP? So are there any specific challenges you have in your industry?
Yeah, like I suppose in the early days, when we started, and it wasn't just for SAP, it was those other products that we looked at from an ERP perspective. We found that the partners we work with, the pre-sales people within the solutions, they just assumed we were like a manufacturing company. That was where they had a lot of experience in selling, whether it be SAP or whatever, into companies. It's manufacturing. You buy product, you create something, and you ship it. That's not construction, and it's very, very different. But when I break it down in a simplistic fashion, we still have labour, we buy and purchase materials, and we have a contingency workforce of subcontractor helping us complete our solutions for our clients. But it's that subcontract element which is the challenging part, and which SAP simply didn't have, and to be honest, the competitive products didn't have either. And even to this day, I still see those challenges with partners and SAP themselves about trying to explain to them how when you're managing a work breakdown structure with thousands and thousands of individual elements, maybe 6 or 7 levels deep, you're packaging that up and setting that to a subcontractor, or elements of that to a subcontractor to manage, which is people, labour, and their services, and then trying to manage the commercial element around that with all the nuances of tax regulations, various retentions and warranties. That it becomes very complex from a commercial perspective to manage, both on a contract side and on a sales side with our client. And that's where we find the biggest challenges with trying to get the solution to work for us and be optimal, so that we can measure that. And as we even progress on our SAP journey, that's still going to be probably the single biggest challenge for us. All of the other stuff tends to be fairly, bread and butter, stick to standard. It does what it says in the tin, but that's the one area that we'd love to try and solve in more detail.
I can imagine. And okay, back to your Golden Gate Bridge analogy. You've got your brush in your hand. What's in your tin? What's next with SAP as you start to paint it again?
Yeah, so we've been on the sort of cloud adoption strategy for quite a number of years now. So we're still on ERP ECC6, so we haven't moved fully to S4. But what we've been doing is adopting the cloud products. So we moved away from the core expenses in ECC a number of years ago to Concur. We've moved off the traditional HCM modules to success factors, and we've purchased the entire suite. We've 3 modules left to deploy on success factors, but by the end of this year we'll be fully fledged on that. And we've recently deployed Ariba. And next on the agenda will be Field Glass. So we've gone on that business of on the periphery, implementing the cloud solutions from SAP integrated naturally with the core. We've moved our ERP instance onto Azure. The next step would be naturally to look at replacing our current database with HANA, and then eventually removing the core onto S4. So that's our sort of next 2-3 year look ahead from an SAP footprint. Having said that, we have lots of other niche products that I want to deploy, and some of those will naturally look to SAP to see if they can meet those demands within their product portfolio, or if it's an alternative solution, how it can be integrated with SAP using their latest solutions, such as the business technology platform and so forth.
Okay, excellent. So plenty to keep you busy then. Not going to be sat twiddling your thumbs much, Philip, there.
Hi, we're the UK and Ireland SAP user group. Did you know we're a fiercely independent not-for-profit? Did you know we're a vibrant community of over 6,500 SAP users? And did you know we help each other by sharing resources, championing education and influencing SAP's future development? Well, you do now. If you'd like to get the most from your SAP investments and be in the know, visit our website, sapusers.org/pod. We hope you enjoy the rest of the podcast.
And so, I suppose from the construction industry, the pandemic must have thrown up some quite unique challenges for you, and also the fact that I suppose the show must go on as well. So what challenges did the pandemic pose to you in your day-to-day job?
Well, the good thing was that we have quite a large remote workforce to begin with, because naturally we were on construction sites, which although they're large systems, in their own right, they can go on for multiple years. In fact, there's one site we've had a presence on since the day I started Mercury.
Wow.
But generally, most sites would have a 1 to 2, maximum 3-year cycle before we would move on to another one. So we have that remote workforce anyway. So the ability to provide remote capability to all our applications, including SAP, was always there. The only unique thing the pandemic really presented was that we had a core head office base with the back office staff, finance, HR, procurement, and so forth. And they suddenly had to work remotely, but because we had the structures already in place, it was really just a matter of an education exercise for that group. Make sure that anyone who still worked off a traditional desktop had a laptop that they could throw onto the arm and bring home with them, and we beefed up our VPN and so forth, so that people could access. And there's a bit of education around security protocols and the typical cheat sheet to try and get access to applications. But because, as I said, that was a small part of the workforce, it wasn't that onerous for us. We also were lucky in the sense that when the pandemic kicked in, we already had Microsoft Teams deployed. The one thing I would say, it certainly helped the adoption of that. It certainly would not have got adopted as quickly as it would have done if the pandemic didn't happen. So there was a very quick learning curve, but if anything, it reinforced some of the strategy and the tools that we saw as our natural evolution anyway, irrespective of what the pandemic brought to us. So yeah, we didn't see that much of a disruption, apart from the fact, from a business perspective, because we were across so many countries in Europe, a lot of them had different regulations around construction sites, whether they were allowed to operate or not. Ireland actually closed construction sites for a period. Most other sites in Europe continued to operate, and then Ireland slowly opened up construction based on the type of industry you were working within. So it was probably more managing that from an IT perspective, realizing which sites we were supporting or needed to support as they opened and closed through those initial months of the pandemic. But thankfully, from a technology footprint, we were in a good place before it kicked off, and it was just really a matter of maintaining that.
Oh, very good. That really interesting in that. And I suppose when you look at your journey, and pandemic aside, etc., which obviously, like you said, it was part of your evolution, probably you sped it up a little bit in a number of areas, but there's been, I would assume, a steep learning curve for you as you've gone on that journey, especially with SAP. And just as you have moved forward with SAP and developed and continue to, if you like, paint the bridge from time to time, where do you go for help and support with SAP-related matters?
To be honest, the first place I always go or generally look towards is the network, which we've developed predominantly through the user group. The user group network is a great source, and the good thing about dipped into that network for help and support, you're often just sharing the idea, the concept to begin with. And in my role, it's not necessarily trying to solve that specific problem. I leave that very much to my team to work on, and I encourage them to use the network resources and capabilities that they have. For me, it's very much, either reinforcing an idea, bouncing something off somebody or whatever it happens to be, and to do that with another customer, generally because they're a member of the user group, is very beneficial. And naturally, when you're doing that, you're not worried about some salesperson necessarily coming back, you're trying to sell something that you've actually realised you didn't need in the first place. So nearly 9 times out of 10, that's the first place I would turn to is that core network within the user group. Then beyond that, naturally, it's going to be to partners. And generally, when you're talking to a partner about something, you have a solid idea that you want to do something, and it's really then a matter of exploring it to understand what are the time implications, what are the pitfalls we need to look out for, what's it going to cost, how long is it going to take, do you have the capability and the resources to help us in this. We've also obviously got SAP. So that, the good thing that those are the sort of three core areas we tend to revert to. Sometimes I will go to the wider sort of analyst community, whether it be Gartner and so forth. But I suppose I'm somewhat biased in one respect, and user group tends to be the first place I turn to.
And on that point, what led you to joining the user group board and then obviously subsequently becoming chair?
So I suppose my user group journey starts way back when we selected SAP back in 2004, 2005 timeframe, and we had started a project to implement it. And as you alluded to, and as I said, I had no SAP experience. There's no SAP experience in the company. We had deployed a partner organization, consulting firm to assist us, and we thought, well, we can rely completely on them if we wish, but it would be worthwhile getting that independent view from other people who've gone through this. So I'd heard about the user community in Ireland, which was quite small and had very recently merged with UK user group community to become UKISUG. And so I joined that. I attended one of the first SIGs back in 2005, found that very beneficial. There was a different chair at that time. And we hadn't even gone live, but it was just hearing the stories of what other people had gone through, other organisations in Ireland, not even within our industry, but irrespective of what industry they came from. You picked up the tips, the lessons learned, the key things you needed to do. So I was attending those regular meetings for 3 years before you, Craig, I think, approached me back in 2008 and asked me, would you like to chair the meetings in Ireland? The current chairman wanted to move on. He was actually leaving his role in the company he was working for. He was moving to an organisation, didn't have SAP, so it didn't make sense that he was chairing an SAP community in Ireland. So I took on that role of chairing the user group meetings in Ireland. Did that for a couple of years before I think I got approached again by the then chairman of the board and asked me if I would like to join the board in 2010, and I've been on the board since then, served as chairman for part of that time between 2013 and 17, and I think the main reason I did it was a new opportunity for me. It helps me develop professionally and personally, but also it was giving something back. I found great benefit for me and my organisation in being part of that community. And it is a community, it's a member community. You get what you put into it, and I felt it was worthwhile putting some more effort back in to help share the knowledge that I had picked up. But while you're doing that, you're still learning more. And it's that very much reciprocal feedback that you get through everything we do as part of this network.
And earlier when I was doing the introduction, obviously also mentioned that you're on the core leadership team of the SAP User Group Executive Network, which is SUGIN. And so what role does SUGIN play in the SAP community?
So SUGIN, it's almost 15 years formed now, and UKISUG was one of the founding members of that. Ultimately, it's a very mature SAP market in the UK and Ireland, and it's not so much in other regions, but there's certainly power in that wider network. So we are conscious that there are user groups globally, and most countries have some form of a user group, whether it be small or large. And clearly through SUGIN, which is that executive network, gives an opportunity for those user groups to come together and share ideas, so globally, on issues globally, and also create a network which is very influential for SAP. There are approximately, and it does flex quite a bit over time, 22 organizations that are part of SUGIN, that global network. And when they measure the number of members that they have and what that represents to SAP, you're almost hitting 70, if not 80%. Of their customer install base could be represented through some member who's part of a user group, which is part of that SUGIN network, which is a huge voice and influential aspect. And then there's the other element whereby being a part of SUGE, you get to meet senior executives at SAP. You hear what the strategy, what the portfolio plans are, and you're in that envious position that you could be one of the first customers to hear what those intentions and those initiatives will be. And these user groups obviously share ideas. They meet twice a year. They have monthly calls, and they're not trying to dictate the way each user group or any customer wants to use or and run in terms of how they deploy and adopt SAP. But it's really an area where you can share ideas, agree on key strategic initiatives and topics that can benefit not just your own user group organization, but ultimately the members and customers that you represent.
I think you should kind of pool in the I suppose, the challenges and the opportunities that all of the world faces, if you like, and speaking to SAP at that high level. Oh, thank you. So why did you join the core leadership team?
Again, it was back to probably one of the reasons I moved to SIG chair to a board position, the chairman of the user group. When you're putting this effort in, you're getting the benefits of the time and effort, and it's all voluntary that these people are doing. You think, well, we're relying very much on these volunteers to give up their time, not just to be part of that network, but actually to sit on teams to help drive it and run it. And I thought, well, there's no better opportunity than now to do that. So when the option comes up to nominate yourself and get elected, I decided that, again, it's a good opportunity for me personally. It helps develop me as a person, but it also helps raise the profile of the UKISUG within the SUGE community. My own company within the global world in terms of industry that we operate in, and give back some of the benefit that I've received as being part of that network. And there's an element of, because it's such a global network and people who sit not just within SUGE but within the core leadership team come from different industry backgrounds, come from different countries. It's a great cultural experience too, working with people from across the world. And there's an element of enjoyment and fun and professional development in that.
Oh, thank you. And so just moving away from the user groups communities for a moment, just what do you think is the biggest challenges facing SAP users in the coming years?
Obviously, this is going to depend very much on where your company's life cycle is in terms of your use of SAP, the challenges your company's going through from a business perspective, whether it be economic, political, whatever it happens to be. And every company's is very different. Like if you're in that envious position of your green field and you're ready to really deploy SAP based on a huge transformational initiative and drive from within your organization, that can be challenging, but it's almost like a blank sheet of paper. Whereas if you're a traditional user and you need to migrate and keep up to date with the technology, but the current version of it works very well, and your business colleagues and elements of your line of business representative are very happy with it, it's a tougher sell. So it probably very much depends on where you are on that cycle. But we all know that you can't stand still with technology. You do need to continually evolve and improve how it's used and the version you use within your organizations. And we certainly are seeing more and more traction towards that move to S4. But I still feel the business case can be a challenge for a lot of organizations to develop and justify. Also, okay, we're going through somewhat with the inflationary and economic challenges we've had over the last 12 months or so. Growth, not just in Europe but globally, is there's concerns, is it slowing and so forth, and is that an opportunity to take a step back and look at your technology footprint and see how you can develop that while the business is maybe slowing down? Because when activity is very large and you're going through massive growth, trying to pull those key business people into a project to do an upgrade or do a rethink or brownfield or greenfield move to S4 can be challenging. So it's probably, I think the challenge is keeping moving forward in the momentum, making sure you've got the right partnership within your business, and whatever you decide, trying to make it all work and integrate and get value from it is always going to be there, and encouraging your business to work with you in that journey. Even though they want to, they do have their day jobs to fulfill, and getting the time from them and working with them successfully is always going to be difficult, but certainly can be very rewarding if it works out and is successful.
Well, thank you, Philip. And as we come to the end now, just one final point, which I suppose you've almost moved towards in what you've just been talking about, is so if you could look into your crystal ball, what do you think the biggest changes we may see in IT in the coming 5 years?
If I look back 5 years ago, I remember having a conversation with a number of CIOs and so forth, and we discussed something like this, and on reflection, some of the ideas that people come up or thoughts that they had haven't actually come through. So the one thing I've learned over time, trying to predict what's going to happen in technology, or even how technology works and operates within an organization, can be quite dangerous.
Yeah.
But the one thing I've found which is definitely happening over the last number of years, and I think will accelerate in the coming years, is the lines between who's responsible for technology will become more and more blurred. Is it technology dictate that strategy, or is it business dictate that strategy? And I think in reality, the really successful ones, as I've said earlier, it's more where you've a good partnership and technology and line of business representatives co-create that strategy together. And I think that's where the true success is. And I think that companies are recognizing that, using that very successfully to carve out their IT strategy and how it looks within an organization. It does mean, I suppose, skill sets will improve on both sides, where traditional IT members will become more knowledgeable around business functions and business processes, and likewise line of business representatives will become more savvy around technology. It doesn't necessarily mean that they will have equal responsibilities. I think responsibilities for the nuts and bolts of IT, whether it be security, infrastructure, communications, probably that will still sit within an IT function, and you'll need an IT function to run that. But when it comes to the application and the use of the solutions for the benefit of a company, that's where it must be a partnership, and it might mean in the future it's more aligned to line of business and so forth. So I see that progressing, but I think it'll depend upon where the company's at and what appetite they have and what they're comfortable with in terms of carving that out for them. But in terms of probably technologies in the next 5 years, I think AI is going to take off. I think there's an element at the minute people are a wee bit nervous about it, worried about the risks, security concerns, lack of control, understanding what it really means. And maybe as they get more comfortable with that, AI will become more prevalent because they'll see the advantages and efficiencies it can bring. Hopefully security will become easier. I think it's just one of those aspects at the minute that it is so important. It consumes a lot more time than it probably we would like it to in an organization. And finally, I suppose I have no idea. There's a lot of talk about the metaverse. I don't think anyone really knows how that is going to pan out. I'm personally still quite skeptical about it. I think we've come out of a pandemic. We were all sick of meeting in Teams and Zoom calls, and the last thing anyone wants to get to is have avatars of themselves in meetings, but who knows where that will go.
Yeah, I think having these discussions over cameras and screens is one thing, but sticking on a VR headset and spending all day moving from meeting to meeting is quite another. So yes, it will be interesting. But thank you very much for that, Philip. I really appreciate that, and thank you for your time. Thank you for your insights, and hopefully our listeners have found our conversation beneficial and valuable. So thank you very much, and thank you for listening, and please make sure you do subscribe so you never miss a future senior IT leader interview. And until the next time, stay safe, stay well, and keep washing your hands.